Hi, this is Keith Townsend of VirtualizedGeek.com with another episode of VirtualizedGeek's Tech Talks. This is episode 8. Today is April the 7th, 2013. This has been a pretty interesting week for me. Last week I took the VCP exam, so we'll talk a lot about the VCP and as well as one of my blog posts on what I like to call crowdsourced distributed cloud computing, or we'll come up with a name for it or official name for it at some point. But the first topic, the VCP exam. So, I've been ragging on VMware again a lot about the fact that you have to take a $5,000 course to sit a 85 question text-based exam that I don't really think does a great job of measuring your skill. So this has been most definitely one of my pet peeves when it comes to the VCP. I officially set the exam Friday. I procrastinated up to the last minute when it came to studying, but I was able to eke through a passing score of 340. I don't mind sharing that because, hey, you know what? It is what it is. Passing is 300. I'm not sure what the range is, but I want this to be kind of a semi-review of the exam. Some of the topics weren't a surprise at all. Some of the things that I didn't get was a surprise. I didn't get a question that kind of explored the maximums and minimums of vSphere in general. I expected to see a lot of questions from a lot of the material that I read, a lot of the test prep that I read. I expected to see a lot of questions that were really around the minimum and maximums of vSphere's configuration, such as the number of processors that a virtual machine can have, dependencies on virtual hardware versions, and the fourth, especially around protocols. I think I only got one question on the ports necessarily to open in order to use something like I believe the question might have been around iSCSI or something. So I was surprised at that. I really studied a lot around the material around vSphere maxims, the firewall ports required to communicate with the vSphere center server, a lot around VMware's products. I was surprised to see that they actually had a couple of cloud computing questions in there. I thought were pretty good questions, actually kind of fair, especially seeing where data center virtualization is moving. It's a pretty fair assumption that if you're going to do virtualization, you should be fairly familiar with the different types of cloud models. That was surprising. What wasn't surprising that, after I came out of the exam, I thought to myself, you know what, was that an exam that someone without experience could pass? In some instances, some of the questions I think did a good job of, especially the questions around storage, did a great job of delving into your knowledge of IT infrastructure. There was a couple of really good networking related questions that kind of tested your knowledge on overall networking, which I think is a very key requirement for virtualization subject matter experts. But overall, I didn't think the test did a great job of measuring someone's independent knowledge of VMware products in general, or vSphere and virtualization technology in general. I thought that it was a test that could be easily gained, so to speak. If you didn't need to actually take the class, you don't actually need to have a home lab to kind of really pass the test. I think you could pass the test based on just reading, taking practice exams, and not actually touching the product. I think this is one of the challenges when it comes to completely text-based tests that aren't performance driven or have elements that have simulations to help really test the depth of someone's knowledge when it comes to a product. I think Cisco does a great job of putting you in scenarios that really stretch your knowledge when it comes to different areas of their product and different areas of the technology. So I'm looking forward to the day when VMware kind of rolls a simulation, more of a simulation-based exam that really does a better job of testing the depth and knowledge of the test taker. I'm happy to have it done with. What's next on the plate for me? I don't know, maybe the PMP or CISP. I don't know, I'm a little burnt out from studying. That was an awful lot of knowledge that I won't use again in many situations to cram into my head in a few-week period. The next topic is actually a pretty cool thought I had while listening to This Week in Google. They talked about Walmart and Walmart using crowdsourced resources to do delivery. And for whatever reasons, you know how we geeks are. You know, we think about one thing and then we go on a complete tangent on another one. This got me to thinking about crowdsourced computing in general. So, you know, if you remember the old SETI project and the genome folding project that helped map different proteins for cancer, and then in a SETI solution that helped to analyze data to find intelligent life outside of Earth. The ideal is that you take really big problems, break them down into small components, and then farm out the problems or the calculations to many PCs or many workstations. So, and you're able to, the agent on the workstation would receive a workload. Using the idle processing time of the CPU, it would crunch that problem, upload the problem back to a centralized repository, and that data will be further analyzed. Really cool approach to using idle cycles. People got really creative. There was at one point a folding client for the PlayStation 3, which really did a great job. That CPU really does a great job at that type of problem. So, you know, I'm thinking, well, how do you crowdsource cloud computing? And, you know, I thought about what would it take to do the same thing as the SETI and folding project, where you could take multiple computers and either do some type of high performance computing solution, or something as simple as running a Linux VM on a fairly powerful machine that has a lot of idle cycles, and then a service provider acting as a broker who would then farm out those resources to consumers of cloud consumers. And then, you know, I thought about kind of who are the companies that are big enough, smart enough to do that, and the backbone requirements to provide that type of solution. The first one that came to mind is actually Google. You know, one of the immediate challenges I thought about was bandwidth. Even with all that computing power that's being idle, so if someone has a MacBook Pro, a computer with an i7 processor, laptop, desktop, that's an awful lot of wasted cycles of a powerful CPUs that's really not doing much. So when you talk about running light cloud-based workloads, kind of like HP's moonshot solution that they announced on how they're going to use ARM-based processors to provide the type of functionality that's truly needed in the data center outside of big database type applications, you know, those systems provide plenty of horsepower to drive most of the computing requirements needed for most enterprise computing. So how do you deliver the image? How do you manage the computing? How do you manage failover? How do you manage redundancy? What happens if someone powers down a computer in the middle of operation? So obviously, you know what, I'm not smart enough to really figure all of that out. But what I do know is that Google has both the bandwidth, literally, with Google Fiber, they have the bandwidth to tackle some of the issues related to delivering images, managing images, managing failover, redundancy. They have the bandwidth when it comes to engineers to solve the tough problems of redundancy, of failover. And if you think about it, it's kind of in their interest to do that type of thing. I mean, even if they internalize the solution, if they could take 10,000 users and get 5 gig of disk space, of local disk space from their machines, how much more could they expand Gmail email without actually adding more environmental impact in their data centers and buying more hard drives? And in theory, it should be relatively cheap. And application specific uses for this based cloud computing, just like the SETI and the folding projects were kind of tailor-made for that distributed computing solution. I think platform as a service or software as a service solutions are kind of tailor-made for that type of computing solution or cloud computing solution. Maybe I've been traveling a little bit too much and I'm off base here, but I like the idea. I'd like to see what you guys think. If I'm a little bit helter-skelter when it comes to the possibility of it, who other than Google could tackle the problem? Could this be a thing that Yahoo tackles? We've talked a lot about how much IP Yahoo still has, especially in the infrastructure and cloud computing and big data arena. Well, that concludes this episode of VirtualizedGeek Tech Talk. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks.